Welcome everyone to Wrasslin Raw!
You're listening to Wrasslin Raw, the podcast that takes you back to when the World Wrestling Federation developed a little bit of an attitude. Thank you for joining us. You're here with Ryan Arico.
Wait, why's your mic working? I can't do my work if my damn mic isn't working.
I've never wanted to strangle you so badly in my life. Joe Giammatteo.
That was a wrist lock, by the way, McMahon.
Both of you. God damn it. I'm the one and only Jason Bartlett, and we're going to examine WWE history, one pay-per-view at a time. That's right, this is a pay-per-view episode, meaning that pay-per-view rules are in effect. It's been a pretty long time since we've gone over those, so I just want to highlight them here for you real quick. We don't get nearly as in-depth with the match details as we do during normal Raw episodes. We each give our star ratings for each of the matches, and Joe will hit us with Dave Meltzer's star ratings as listed in the Wrestling Observer newsletter and see how Dave's ratings stack up against ours. Also, at the end of the pay-per-view, we have a little chat about whether or not we got our money's worth throughout all of this. Am I forgetting anything, guys?
No, I think that covers it.
Yeah, that's it.
Well then, let's do this. I've been looking forward to talking about this with you guys. In this episode of Wrasslin Raw, we're going to be talking about In Your House 11, Buried Alive. This pay-per-view was recorded on October 20th, 1996 at the Market Square Arena in Indianapolis, Indiana, and features Vince McMahon, Jerry the King Lawler, and briefly Jim Ross on commentary. Are you guys ready?
I'm ready.
I'm ready, as long as my mic doesn't keep cutting out through this show.
God damn it. All right, then let's get into it. This pay-per-view starts out with some great voiceovers from both Undertaker and Mankind, video packages going back and forth to bring us to the same crescendo that this story has reached that we'll see play out on our screens later on tonight. Sony PlayStation brings you Buried Alive. And right off the bat, two disappointing notes for me. Vince McMahon is back with commentary, and Jim Ross is there. He's still bitching, and in this case, he doesn't have a microphone. This is the classic pay-per-view intro scene where you have your commentators standing by ringside together, letting us know how things are going to work and just welcoming us to the event. Vince and Jerry both have handheld microphones. Jim Ross does not. But thankfully, as this is a pay-per-view, we don't spend a ton of time getting into it, so let's go into our first match of the night. Stone Cold Steve Austin defeats Hunter Hearst Helmsley by pinfall in 15 minutes and 30 seconds. My first thought on Hunter's entrance was that we have two heels here, and I had plenty of time to dwell on that because Hunter's entrance took freaking forever. I thought it was like a Shawn Michaels entrance or something.
Kate watched this one with me, and she brought up something that I never realized, but is right. Hunter Hearst Helmsley's music sounds like it's from the Nintendo Zelda game.
Yeah. Huh. I thought you were going to say that she commented on how incredibly frightened Helmsley's woman escort looked.
She wasn't actually paying attention to what was going on the screen, but she was able to hear the music.
I mean, I hear it. I definitely hear it. I would have went with maybe Castlevania, though, that kind of creepy harpsichord kind of thing going on. Creepy only in the context of somebody that brings out a willing slave and then has them taken during every match. The promo from Steve Austin leading into his entrance was pretty solid. But what was even more solid was the sound of breaking glass as Stone Cold comes out. And that's it, gentlemen. We have the full package. Stone Cold Steve Austin is here. Not that he hasn't been here, but it's finally nice to get that final piece of the puzzle going on. Audio difficulties on Jim Ross's microphone were a bad omen at the start here. Didn't like where that was going, and I was really hoping that that shit wasn't going to continue and ruin this pay-per-view. We'll see how that played out. Both guys were taking turns interacting with the fans there at ringside. That was a little strange. Both guys meaning Hunter and Austin. And I was really fucking tempted already to just mute this pay-per-view if the microphone stuff was going to continue. The slap and shove at the start of this, it was brief, but it was good. And once we were finally able to get into some action, it was fast and tight and looked great. We even had a pointless split screen to keep the mediocrity going there outside of it so we could get a visual of JR being frustrated. Because that's what we want to see, not Stone Cold Steve Austin and Hunter Hearst Helmsley, aka Triple H wrestling. We want to see Jim Ross's pissed off face. And that bullshit kept going. I really had to restrain myself from turning this off. It was about at this point where I texted you guys a picture of the remote up at my camp where I was watching this, asking where the fuck is the mute button on this thing, because it didn't have one. I was legit looking for it.
Wow.
Yeah, I was pretty pissed off early on in this pay-per-view. One thing that was nice was that JR, when we could hear him, was pointing out all of the faults in Vince's play-by-play, like the fact that Vince doesn't know move holds. Lawler was making fun of the 1-2, no he didn't.
That was great.
That was
That
good.
was. I definitely thought of you, Joe.
Yeah, that was fantastic.
And then Mr. Perfect. Of course, because that's where we're at. It amazes me.
No business being there at all.
No business whatsoever.
That was another King comment.
Yeah.
It amazes me that these valets just continue to leave with no issue. You would think that Hunter would tell them at the beginning of this, like, hey, there's this guy. He's going to come out. He's going to try to get you to leave with him. Please don't. I'll pay you double if you don't. But no, they still leave. The work at the outside wasn't bad. But by the time we got there, it felt like we had wasted too much time with too many other things. But finally, we got to the double middle finger into the stunner to get the pin and the 3 count, and they made sure to get some audio of JR bitching to close out this segment. Guys, this was probably the worst fucking way to kick this pay-per-view off for me, and I think it's because I know for a fact that these two guys can have an amazing match. We've seen at least a half a dozen great Stone Cold Triple H matches in our lives. I know it's possible, and there's no reason to think it couldn't have been possible here. But between JR, Mr. Perfect, all of the stalling, time-killing, it just felt like Austin and Helmsley were prevented from having a good match by the storytelling going on around them. I ended up going with 1 star on this because the action we got, when we were allowed to have it, was great. The bullshit going on around the match, though, was a pisser and a half, and that really fucking tuned me out. Joe, please, what did you think of our show opener here?
Unfortunately, there's a lot going on here when there doesn't really need to be a lot going on. This was supposed to be Savio Vega versus Stone Cold Steve Austin, but Savio had an injury over the weekend, I guess, and this was kind of a last-minute thing. There's a reason to be excited here. Hunter Hearst Helmsley versus Stone Cold Steve Austin, 2 legends. But unfortunately, you've got this story with Helmsley, with Mr. Perfect, and that's going to get in the way of what could have been a great match. However, I think that this was so pivotal for a few reasons. You mentioned the glass-breaking music premiere. I can't just look past that. That is huge. That is probably one of the biggest entrance songs of all time by the great Jim Johnston. Not only that, but keep in mind, we're still very PG, but Austin is starting to use more cursing. He's using the double middle fingers. He's telling Mr. Perfect very clearly to get the fuck out of here.
Yeah.
So we're getting into that attitude, and I kind of wonder sometimes, would Austin have been as big as he was without all the cursing?
Probably not.
Probably not, but that's where they were going. That's where wrestling was going. In particular, the WWF, and what better guy to wave that banner than Stone Cold Steve Austin? Just let him do his thing, and it works. And I gotta give it 3 stars, just mostly because of those things with Steve Austin going on here.
Yeah, I'm going to probably end up being in Joe's camp a little bit more. Not because I don't agree with you, Bartlett, with the JR stuff and the Mr. Perfect stuff. It's just in my mind, I had to separate them because when I did pay attention to what was in the ring, this was really good action between them. It just kept on being hobbled by JR and the mic. And if they just would have had JR bitching like they did during Raw, it would have been easier to ignore. But the fact that it was the sound of a cutting off microphone through this entire match adds an extra layer of annoyance that brings the commentary way down. But I just couldn't take my eyes off the way the guys were working together, though, because it felt like an attitude match between these two. And, you know, obviously the personnel helped out, but also the action between the two and the things that you brought up, Joe. The way Stone Cold's acting here, we've seen the stunner, but I'm not sure we've seen the double middle finger kick to the stomach stunner yet. So on top of the music, that's another huge thing we got here. And to further highlight your point, Joe, the crowd went crazy when he did the middle finger. Yeah. The people loved it. And that is going to be the realization of the industry moving forward is this is what these fans want. They want a crude, cussing, beer drinking, rude motherfucker in there. You know, they don't want the typical babyface anymore. And because of all of those things, I'm with you. I had to give it a 3-star as well.
You know, for the record, I mean, I don't disagree with anything you guys have said here. We're mostly together on all of this. The one defining thing for me, though, here is that if we would have had this kind of bullshit on a Raw, for fuck's sake, I've given a match featuring Jake Roberts a highlight in the recent past. You know, I'm a pretty forgiving person, but in this particular case, we paid for this, and I think that's the thing that really kind of you didn't, but in theory, in exercise, if we were contemporary fans, we would have paid for this
again.
Well, yeah.
Well, we have to be fair, though. For those of us who did pay, it's a lower price.
Yeah, it is. And that's something we will discuss later. Joe, what did Meltzer have to say about this match?
He must have enjoyed it. He gave it 3.25 stars. He is also pointing out that Austin seems to be getting over as a face as the swearing, flipping off character.
Well, I mean, those are things that a babyface does, I'm sure.
Well, yeah, I mean, you got these guys are two heels in a match, but the crowd was definitely in favor of Austin.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
But it kind of makes you wonder, is it because they were liking Austin or because they were hating Hunter? Both are equally valid.
Probably a little bit of both.
A little bit of both, but the way they reacted to his middle finger, I think they are more reacting to his middle finger than they are to Stone Cold. I think they just loved that.
Mm-hmm.
Something that none of us love, though. It's the history of the tag team division, specifically the Smoking Guns here. The mini segment that we go into next in between matches, a complete history of the Smoking Guns and Sonny and the tag team titles. Just a whole bunch of shit that I'd like to forget. And Doc Hendricks backstage with the Smoking Guns, that was also not a good thing. Billy and Bart, not all that great on the mic. Doc himself tried to stick with it, but again, didn't last long. That was a good thing. So now we go into our next match. Owen Hart and the British Bulldog with Clarence Mason defeat the Smoking Guns, Billy and Bart, by pinfall in 9 minutes and 17 seconds to retain the WWF Tag Team Championships. Those audio issues for JR still not fixed yet going into this match. Great news. Owen Hart and Billy Gunn to start this off looked pretty good together. The missile dropkick from Owen into Bart looked fantastic. And Sonny was backstage watching this. And on top of that, the shit with JR's audio kept going. It was all I could hear. I couldn't focus on the match. It was really just drilling into my fucking brain at this point. Billy's elbow drop looked terrible. But it was nice to see the Guns tying some chain moves together. That's something they kind of got out of the habit of a little bit. with their heel turn. They used to be machines putting the chain moves together, but not so much lately.
Those black pants are too tight.
Yeah, and the belt buckles. My God, I can't imagine taking any kind of move from somebody wearing a belt buckle that large. But it was ridiculous to see the interference that closed out this match. The Bulldog sneaking in to pull Bart out of position by Bart's belt while the Guns were setting up the Sidewinder. As if Bart Gunn couldn't feel a powerhouse like the Bulldog sticking a hand down the back of his pants. Like, you had to know that was going on. But that's the setup for the finish. Once they reverse the Sidewinder, Owen and Bulldog clean up to get the pin and the 3 count, retaining the titles. Not a lot of notes here because of 2 main things. I mean, there wasn't a whole lot to note going on in the match. It wasn't bad exactly, but commentary really had me pretty goddamn pissed off during this. You know, I was so distracted and spent too much time trying to figure out how to mute my TV that I just didn't put a lot of notes down. Like I said, work in the ring, not bad, and I can't let that be affected by how much I fucking hated everything else here. So in the interest of fairness, I was going with 1 star again, and I really wish I could have paid more attention. Ryan, what did you have on this match?
Yeah, I also start with the JR shit continues right from the beginning. But I did like he pointed out that Owen Hart got a haircut, because he did. Yeah. And this is the haircut we're going to pretty much see him with going forward, that I remember. The action in the ring was solid, you know, for the most part. The Bulldog and Owen especially, they looked really sharp. But we just are constantly on the mic issues. And then in this match, we're also going to continuously go to a split screen with Sonny. And the only thing I could think of is, this sure is a tag team match, isn't it? It ends, and yeah, that finish was pretty bad. The Bulldog just basically pulling Bart's pants down for a full 30 seconds, and no one notices. He's trying to hide behind Bart and know what the ref, Billy, no one sees it. It was a really poor ending. And because of that and the constant distractions, yeah, I couldn't go much more than a 1 star either.
I didn't even notice Owen's haircut until one of them mentioned it. I think it was Jim Ross. But yeah, you're right. This is going to be the haircut that we are going to get moving forward for sure. This match was not good. The referee distractions to me are always just cheesy and 80s and before. You know, it was maybe funny, but now it just seems too cheesy to me. And not only was the move by Billy just so delayed, the referee is yelling at him while he's going up to the top rope. And then when Billy jumps off the top rope, the referee just looks towards the left side, like where the entrance ramp is, for no reason, because he's trying to look away from what's happening. And why the fuck would he ever do that in real life?
Well, he's got to check to make sure no one's coming down the ramp. Right?
Yeah. So that whole sequence was just a total clusterfuck. I give this 1 star as well. I just didn't think it was very good or any special from any other matches with these guys, and I expect a lot better from these guys.
What'd Meltzer think?
Dave Meltzer gave this 2 stars. He said, once again, these 2 teams who on paper should have very good matches had another average match.
Accurate.
Yeah. Yeah. And whenever you were talking about where the referee was looking, it made me wonder which one, because I can't remember. Maybe one of you can help me out with
It wasn't Hebner or Kyoto. It was one of the other, and it wasn't Tim White.
Which one of the Guns was the legal man in? Whoever made the pinfall, or was going to make the pinfall, would have had to have been the legal man, right?
Yeah, I don't remember, but I just know he was yelling at Billy to get off the top rope. So I'm guessing he was not the legal man. But did he make the pin?
No, because they got reversed out of it. We never got to see.
Yeah, right. So that part of it was fine, but then the referee just looks away. Yeah. He looks away from what's happening to pretend like he didn't see what happened.
All right. Well, I mean, the whole thing was just silly. So let's not dwell on it. Backstage on the Superstar line, you can get yelled at by Hunter Hearst Helmsley while Ray Rougeau looks on helplessly.
No, that was Triple H doing the yelling there.
Yeah.
Well, that was definitely Ray Rougeau looking helpless. They mentioned here that JR's headset is fixed, so hopefully that stays true. But then JR ends up in the ring to keep complaining about the microphone situation, just red-assed and bitching up there again. JR announces here that Bret Hart is going to be live on Raw tomorrow night. And you can really tell that Vince just loves being victimized by JR here. He has the biggest shit-eating grin on his face while JR was bitching about him, until the camera pans back to him and then he wipes the grin off real quick. We caught it a couple times there. Earlier on the free-for-all, Kevin Kelly was talking to Farouk with that ridiculous helmet, and then Ahmed Johnson with that ridiculous jacket. The bottom line of this is that Ahmed beat Farouk with a 2x4, and Farouk will not be wrestling tomorrow. By then, Mr. Perfect was on his way to ringside to join commentary as we go into our next match. The Wild Man, Mark Mero, with Sable, defeats Goldust with Marlena by pinfall in 11 minutes and 38 seconds to retain the WWF Intercontinental Championship. Goldust's entrance looked great. Marlena looked great as always. But then we had to go backstage to hear from the Mild Man, and he was suitably mild and unexciting in this promo, taking him out to the ring. Sable looked pretty good in her dress. I usually don't note that, but this one was especially appropriate and fitting for her. She looked really nice in it. But then, holy shit, the Mild Man got pyro. And now we know what happened to Aldo Montoya's pyro. They took all of Aldo's pinwheels and combined them into one giant multi-pinwheel pyro rig. They're saving money on the Mild Man. That's good fiscal sense.
And Adam Bomb's mushroom cloud, too.
Yeah. Yep.
Don't forget.
Cherry on the top is the mushroom cloud.
Mm-hmm.
It was hilarious to me that Goldust had to blatantly telegraph the first sequence to make sure Mero got it. And things stayed more or less just like that through the first few minutes of this match. Safe moves, nothing risky, or at least nothing that would be enough to expose the Mild Man more than necessary. And even then, with all of this safe work, Mero was occasionally offbeat. I loved Goldust spitting in Mero's face. That's one of those, like living vicariously moments. I wish I could fucking spit on Mark Mero sometimes too. Perfect said that Mero has to take high-risk maneuvers to remain champion, and I would say that Mero has to take that one same maneuver over and over again because he doesn't know how to do anything else. That being the suicide dive or plancha or whatever the fuck you want to call it over the top rope. You know, the typical Mero sequence, clothesline, out of the ring, over the top rope. I thought it was funny that Perfect was given the opportunity to explain the story behind him and taking Hunter Hearst Helmsley's women, but he doesn't because there isn't one, because they never thought that far into the story. Goldust got on the mic briefly to draw some heat, and while it did work, the audience fucking hated him. It felt really, really, really mistimed and out of place. I'm not sure what the deal there was. Mero's reversal of the curtain call was slow and telegraphed, but then Mr. Perfect got involved because of some supposed issue with the referee? I don't know. I was a little confused on that. And then, of course, Hunter Hearst Helmsley came out. For some reason, Goldust wanted to come at Perfect, but Mr. Perfect dropped Goldust with a perfect-looking working punch. And that's two now. These working punches that Mr. Perfect is throwing at people look fucking great. And as that whole pile of bullshit was sorting itself out, back in the ring, the Mild Man was barely able to pull off a Samoan drop on Goldust. And I mean barely. And then he started dancing the Watusi, I guess, as a way to signal for the Wild Thing finisher. How fucking stupid can you get? Mero got great height on it, but it took forever to set up. And that got the pin in the 3 counts. And for some reason, Mr. Perfect was in there to raise Mark Mero's arm. This was a tough match for me to rate. On the one hand, the whole JR commentary problem was solved. Done. JR's not there. We're not having these mic issues anymore. Great. We can move on. But on the other hand, we were watching Mark fucking Mero. Goldust did a pretty fair job of carrying this match, all things considered, but the way they brought Perfect into it was just confusing to me. I ended up having to go with 1 star. Again, Joe, what did you think?
Well, I guess Dave Meltzer was right about them dropping that lesbian angle between Sable and Marlena, right? Because we didn't get any of that, any of those shenanigans. So that's disappointing. Mero getting the pyro, and then he brings Sable in to do her weird waving at the crowd thing is almost like a little taint tickler for what we're going to see later with Sable. Because that's pretty much all she does later is strip down to a bikini and wave to the crowd.
Yep. And then powerbomb her husband.
Right.
This match started out okay, but then Mero had to get all of his shit in, and with his moveset that he does and a bunch of choreographed, sloppy-looking moves. We did get back to a decent-looking match after that sequence. I think Goldust worked pretty well with him, but again, it's a mild man match. It's never going to be that exciting. The wild thing is a nice move. It's a good move for the live crowd to see, but you're right. It takes forever to set it up. It's just not believable that Goldust is just going to lay down there for that long to allow him to set up the wild thing. And the crowd popped for it, so I mean, it has to be an exciting move for a live crowd to see. The stuff with Mr. Perfect, like, I am glad that Jim Ross is off the commentary table at this point with all that mic cutting bullshit, but Mr. Perfect was kind of annoying on commentary, I thought, just arguing with Jerry Lawler the whole time. Then he goes in and celebrates with Mark Mero. I guess maybe this is the beginning of that double cross that he might be pulling on the mild man. I guess we'll see what happens. I didn't hate this match, but I also didn't really enjoy it. I didn't think Mark Mero never gives us anything different. He just never does. I really don't like the jobbing out of Goldust recently. It continues and I don't like it. But I suppose I'll give this 2 stars because I didn't hate it, but it just didn't give me anything special.
We start off with Mark in the back. That's where I'm going to start off, with him in his promo. And this was especially bad from him. He fumbles just about every word coming out of his mouth in this promo. And it just is really bad. Then he comes down to the ring and we get this new firework display. And man, it's like an entire section of scaffolding that comes down to support these pinwheel fireworks.
It was like a 20 by 20 frame.
Yeah. It looked like the broadside of the Hell in the Cell is what it looked like.
Yeah.
That was kind of funny. Once the match started, Mark, he gets in his normal repertoire. I mean, that's all he knows. It's the same stuff and wasn't very exciting. The match did pick up a little bit later. Once Goldust took over, he was able to kind of take control and bring this match into something that was at least serviceable. I didn't want to turn it off by the time we got to the end of it, and that was mainly due to Goldust, almost exclusively due to Goldust, because bringing in Mr. Perfect and Hunter, having them interrupt during this certainly didn't add anything, but finally getting the mic issue solved and JR gone, that was definitely a plus. In the end, I think Goldust brought it up to a 2-star for me as well. This definitely wasn't the worst mild man match that we've seen.
Yeah. Joe, what'd Meltzer think?
Dave Meltzer gave it 2 3/4 stars. Jeez. He says that Mero did a lot of good moves in this match, but the two did not work together as well as you would think.
Mero did a lot of good moves. Did I hear that correctly?
Yep.
Huh.
Those are the words.
How about that? Joe, you put it just the right way earlier whenever you said Mero has to get his shit in. That's like the perfect encapsulation. I mean, we can go back and just edit all of our past episodes involving Mark Mero and just put in a clip of you saying Mero has to get his shit in. And that is the complete description of any Mark Mero match at this point. I mean, you can set your fucking watch by the guy anymore.
Mm-hmm.
Like the Lex Luger sequence.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, good call.
Yeah.
Good call on that one. I had almost forgotten about that. Thanks for reminding me, Ryan. But you're absolutely right. Something that I also wish I could forget, Fake Razor and Fake Diesel. We go backstage and JR is there with them, and JR has Fake Razor and Fake Diesel behind him, and they're directing the AOL chat room. These two poor bastards. I'm assuming that these were interns here having to deal with this, listening to JR bitch at them, tell them what to type.
This whole pay-per-view really made JR look like a total piece of shit.
Yeah.
This whole entire show.
I'm glad they're going to drop it quick.
Yeah.
Vince next lets us know that we're moments away from the Battle of the Powerbombs. which is the new way that they were trying to package our next match. There's a lot of supporting material on this. Apparently all kinds of video packages have been recorded about who has the better powerbomb, and this is the first time we've seen or heard anything about any of it, though.
It sounds like we're going to see a lot of powerbombs, right?
Yeah. Oh, yeah. It's going to be one for one. They're just going to start trading them. They made sure to get Shawn Michaels in there to comment on his experience with both of them even. Because, I mean, Shawn Michaels has taken a powerbomb from Sid and Vader both, right? He's
devastating. He's
the expert.
Yeah.
At this point.
Yep.
I mean, look at all the brain damage.
Oh, my God. Yeah.
I mean, how many powerbombs did he take from those Marines?
Yeah. My God. 2 apiece. So what? Like 43? Something like that? We usually don't talk about the midsection segments, but I have to ask just real quick, do either of you remember any mention of this being the battle of the powerbombs leading into this pay-per-view? I mean, I know we don't watch Superstars, but come on, like any mention.
Not a shred of it, no.
I do recall something about it, but it wasn't as clear as this. I mean, this was like, they were making it out to be like, we're going to see nothing but powerbombs.
They had video footage of like Jim Cornette screaming, "You took the power bomb!" I mean, like, we didn't see any of this.
Yeah. Think about all the buildup we got for this shitty match, too, leading up to this for the past like 4 or 5 weeks. They never mentioned this.
It was almost like they did a month worth of vignettes like the Undertaker Mankind cemetery stuff, except for power bombs.
Right.
Well, Joe, you said it best. Let's go now into our next shitty match. Psycho Sid defeats Vader with Jim Cornette by pinfall in 8 minutes even. That earns Sid the #1 contender position at Survivor Series for the WWF Championship. Sid is out first. Sid loves it. The crowd loves it. I loved it. It was good to see. Sid was positively drenched in baby oil. Every single movement, twitch of the muscle, shake of the head, everything sprayed oil within a 5-foot radius around him. But then, out of nowhere, Shawn Michaels was coming down to the ring. He goes to shake Sid's hand, jaws a second with Vader and Cornette, who had already come out by that point, and then heads over to commentary, where he joins Vince and Lawler as the match finally gets started in earnest. We got a split screen with Michaels. Michaels sounded absolutely intoxicated here. He was barely making any sense.
It's the only way to enjoy this match.
Yeah, right. This was really strange, his behavior here, and I'll get more in depth on that here shortly, but just really, really strange all around. The competitors in the ring, on the other hand, weren't doing much at all. And that is the note that takes up the majority of my match time here. This looked terrible. Fucking terrible. Shawn Michaels, on the other hand, he looked like he was trying to grit his teeth while he was talking. We all know what that means. Vader catching Sid from the top rope, that actually looked kind of good, but it also looked like it blew out a couple of discs because Vader wasn't able to capitalize on it. He caught Sid, but then he just kind of had to drop Sid and walk away breathing hard.
Yes, I wondered that too. Like, it was impressive to see him catch him, but then he just like set him down.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Nothing was looking good here at all. Not the interference from Cornette, not the multiple powerbomb attempts, not the comeback. The chokeslam to finish it didn't even look good. Vader barely got off the mat for it. And by the way, no conclusion to that who has the better powerbomb angle that was thrown together at the last minute. This was a dud for me. There was nothing going on here to come close to redeeming this match. Every bit of it looked terrible. Ryan, what did you think, please?
You know, Sid, he came out, and as we've mentioned many times, the capacity crowd were on their feet. They love Sid, and he got a hell of a cheer coming in. But soon as it starts, you could see where the pace of this match was going to go. And Michael's on commentary. I don't know what the hell was wrong with him. I don't know if he was drunk or was just out of it, or, like I stated earlier, had one too many power bombs, but he was brain dead, basically, in the way he was talking here. It didn't make any sense. A little bit later in the match, he did make a dig. The action in the ring is clearly just slow and lumbering. And Michael says, where else could you see two big guys like this work so quick? Like, it had to be him making fun of just how terrible these two guys look together in the ring, because it was bad. And the choke slam, Vader, you said he barely got up. I don't know. I'm not sure he did it all. It looked like he just leaned backwards for this choke slam. The worst thing is, this is who's going up against our champ at Survivor Series. I mean, this is what sets it up. Clearly, it's a dud for me.
Yeah, to go back to the entrances, you're right, Ryan. This crowd is exploding for Sid. I still can't get over it. I don't understand why these fans are just losing their shit over babyface Sid. Vader's entrances are pretty good too, but that's pretty much where it stops with him at this point. After his entrance, there's not much to like, unfortunately. Shawn comes out to commentary, and the thing that I was disappointed in with that is that he didn't have the belt with him. I feel like now, if that was to happen, I mean, WWE just pimps out all of their belts now. So I feel like back then, maybe they just didn't do that as much. So that was a little disappointing. Sid does a absolutely terrible job of selling that tennis racket shot that he took from Jim Cornette. I mean, he just like rolled over on his back and just laid there. He didn't like sell the fact that his back was in pain at all. You know, we talked about Vader catching Sid from the top, which was impressive, but then he just sets him down. And this whole match was just extremely slow and cautious. And we are being told by Vince and commentary that everything is devastating in this match, but it doesn't look like it. I mean, none of the moves looked devastating at all. They looked slow and cautious.
Catching Sid in that press looked pretty devastating by the way Vader reacted to it.
And we end with a bad choke slam, and this match was billed as the Battle of the Powerbombs. Can you guys answer a question for me? How many powerbombs did we see in this match?
We had to see at least 3 or 4, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. We saw 0, and that's how many stars I gave this, was 0 stars. It's a dud. Dave Meltzer gave this 3/4 of a star.
Holy okay. Phew. For a split second, I thought you were going to say 3 stars.
3/4 of a star. He says that Sid was awful, although the match was probably better than you'd expect given the participants. So, you know, that's worthy of 3/4 of a star, I guess.
Okay.
On his scale.
So I mentioned that we would get a little more in depth on Shawn Michaels here. Usually I don't get into some of the stuff that I learn on whenever I do the match card research for shows here, but what was really surprising and a little bit concerning about this, in the broadcast match card, this is the second to last match. In the live match card, there were 2 dark matches after the Buried Alive match, the first being a tag team match with the Godwins and the New Rockers, which all the more reason not to see that. But the headliner for the live audience was Shawn Michaels defending the belt against Goldust.
Oh.
And so this interview, this talk here was like 4 matches before going out and doing that.
Did you see how long these matches were? I mean, was that a schmoz quick match?
No, they just get listed as dark matches, so.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Yeah, he looked like he was in no condition to wrestle tonight, that's for sure.
Yeah. And just an added little detail there for the ongoing downward spiral that is Shawn Michaels. It's good that he'll be not having as much responsibility riding on his shoulders pretty soon, I guess.
The smile is fading away.
Yeah, I didn't see a smile once there.
Yeah.
Is it fading away, or is he just slowly developing a tolerance that will need to be increased dosages?
Well, his best buddy Bret Hart is back, so maybe he's really hitting it all pretty hard.
Maybe if he injects some Sunny into him.
Oh God. Moving along here, we had a video segment next, pitching the Survivor Series Hall of Fame weekend. Doc Hendricks was there to get us excited about things and to also grab an interview with Sid after Sid's match. Jim Ross breaks into this, though, and more or less just upstages Doc Hendricks as an interviewer. He asks some pointed questions of Sid. It sounded fantastic, honestly. Like, I really liked where they were going with this and how they did this. JR was giving short, clipped questions like, just for example, did you feel good in the match? And Sid said, yep. Did you think you were going to win? Yep. Like that, just very rapid fire. But then it kind of fell apart when Sid forgot whatever he was saying mid-sentence. And it devolved pretty quickly after that. But we are minutes away here from someone being buried alive. So let's take a look at the things that happened to get us here. We got a lengthy recap of the entire Undertaker Mankind angle. It wasn't bad, but it was very comprehensive and time-intensive. Vince McMahon reminds us again that this is an unsanctioned match as we go into our final match of the night. The Undertaker defeats Mankind with Paul Bearer in a Buried Alive match in 18 minutes and 25 seconds. Up until this point, it's been a little hazy as to what exactly constitutes a win here, but McMahon points out that this will start in the ring and end in the little makeshift cemetery that's there. I liked it when they went into the crowd after things got going. That was a pretty crazy spot, especially with Mankind squealing while he was laying there on the floor. And I liked the Paul Bearer interference, crotching Undertaker when Undertaker tried to do the rope walk. That just, something about that just feels right. That's the right way to do interference in a match like this, and especially with these characters. It looked like Paul Bearer handed Mankind an EpiPen to attack the Undertaker with. I have no idea what that was.
I think it's just the same pen that he brought his leg back to life with in the last pay-per-view.
Yeah, it's the pen you'd sign the guest book at the funeral home.
Mankind's first chair shot to the Undertaker looked and sounded great. Once the fight makes its way back up to the gravesite, Taker got knocked in, and we got the word from Vince here that the person must be buried to lose. So that gave us a little more clarity, but still kind of not really like what defines buried, I guess. I don't know. We'll see. It didn't seem like a whole lot of this was really thought out all that well. And then a fantastic hip toss from the Undertaker, throwing Mankind off of the burial mound. That looked fucking great. I popped my ass off for that. Mankind hit a great pile driver on the Undertaker, and I loved the pin attempt and then the frustration from Mankind when Mankind remembered he has to bury his opponent to win. That was some good shit, pal. I also loved the double arm DDT onto the chair. Nobody can pull off a double arm DDT like Mankind or McFoley or whatever you want to say. Always looks good coming from him. And that double arm DDT onto the chair, that's when things ramped up a bit. The use of weapons got a little intense with the chair, but then the ring stairs took it to the next level, especially with the crowd. They were into it before, they got even more into it then, and that's something that I had to pointedly note here. These guys, meaning Undertaker and Mankind, they were playing the crowd like a fiddle. They had this crowd in the palms of their hands throughout this entire match. It was pretty fucking cool to see. With a chokeslam into the grave, the Undertaker started shoveling, and after it looked like it was maybe just enough dirt to maybe kind of cover the body, I guess. Still, it was never really defined, but Undertaker is claimed the victor here. Officials show up to stop the Undertaker, but he throws them off the mound and keeps on digging. Burying, I guess. But then someone in a black hooded mask comes out of nowhere, nails the Undertaker with a shovel to rescue Mankind, taking Mankind out of the grave, throwing Taker in while they start to bury the Undertaker. Goldust comes out to help, and then fucking Crush comes out to help bury the Undertaker.
You popped your ass off.
Oh, I did. Yeah, the high point of my night right there. And Hunter Hearst Helmsley was there. Justin Hawk Bradshaw was there. They were all there with shovels burying the Undertaker. It was at this point that I noticed and really loved the garbage coming at them from the fans. People were throwing cups full of liquid, and I mean, it wasn't a total like hurricane of garbage, but there was enough there to notice. And I also loved Vince McMahon saying that this has gotten out of hand, while nobody tries to do anything to stop it. And they kept going with it. You know, I would have been pretty concerned about The Undertaker if I hadn't have heard him kick on the oxygen tank when he went down in the hole. Did you guys hear that too?
No, I didn't hear it.
Yeah, I didn't hear it either.
Yeah, Mankind did the same thing. Whenever he was thrown into the hole, they immediately went over onto their stomach and put their head in a very specific position. Mankind was at what would be the foot of the grave.
I thought maybe you saw like a snorkel poking out of the dirt there.
Oh, no. No, I heard it, though. I've been around enough oxygen tanks in my life to know what one sounds like, and that was definitely a tank getting kicked on. Just, you know. But they needed to do that because they legitimately fucking buried him. I mean, they put the majority of that dirt back in that fucking hole. He was definitely buried in there, to the point where Mankind was crawling in there and like jumping up and not jumping, but like standing on the dirt and packing it down. And if without that oxygen tank, he would have been in kind of maybe a little bit of serious trouble. But then in what was a just total callback to Friday the 13th, a lightning strike hits the grave. And the Undertaker is revived and sticks his hand out of the grave and waves it around to show us that he is definitely not dead, as we fade to black to end this pay-per-view. This match, it started off slow for me, just in terms of the story in the ring and getting things going. But once they got in the swing of things, I was there with it. I was engaged in the action. And, you know, I was at a pretty fucking high rating up until the stuff happened after the finish, to the point where I was debating on whether or not to include that in my rating, because technically it happened after the match was called as a victory for The Undertaker, but it was still part of this whole gimmick and the way that we ended things here. I was kind of unsure how to handle it. I ended up settling on 3 stars for this match. It was a really absorbing match, but it was also handicapped by literally every match that came before it, for me at least. Joe, what did you think of our main event here?
Well, I think it's funny looking back that they did this match gimmick on site on like this fake sandbox grave inside an arena instead of off site somewhere, or maybe in the back somewhere to make it look a little bit darker and gloomier, because I don't know, it just seems strange to have it inside the arena where all the fans are. You know, they're like right behind it.
I think maybe that decision was because of all the criticism they got from the Boiler Room Brawl, that the crowd didn't get to see most of the action, that maybe they wanted to make that not the case here.
Yeah. I mean, it was so enjoyable for the crowd that one of them threw a cup of Coca-Cola into the grave that was buried with The Undertaker. But yeah, it's just funny looking back on it. And, you know, the thing is, with the ending was kind of shitty, you know, all the shit after the match was over. But the gimmick itself, they didn't really play around with it too much. And I thought that made it really good. They had a good match in the ring and just right outside the ring. They were doing some stuff with the chair that was pretty clever. Undertaker took a chair shot, an unprotected chair shot to the head. And then he falls down into a bunch of peanut shells on the floor. His face was like buried in these peanut shells, which was funny. Bartlett, you mentioned Paul Bearer crotching him on the ropes. You know, that was probably one of the only times that we've seen the walking the ropes fail for The Undertaker, which, again, clever shit. And part of it was probably Undertaker, but I got to think that Mick Foley, you know, it sounds like Mick Foley was always coming up with ideas like this for these matches. It's almost like he produced his own matches from some of the stories you hear. But really good match. These two characters work so fucking well together. It's just, you could never get tired of seeing these guys have a match. The stuff at the end after, the Masked Man, the commentary completely ignored that guy. They said nothing about him. And normally Vince is like, who is this Masked Man? Who is that? You know, making a big deal about it, but nothing mentioned about him. And since when are all of these guys Paul Bearer's henchmen? I mean, Hunter Hearst Helmsley, Crush, I don't know. I wish they would have just stuck to Undertaker and Mankind, do something with those two. If you want to have the masked guy come out, that's fine, but maybe point out that he's there And what is he doing here? He has no business being out here, that type of stuff. Maybe would have made it a little bit better, but I'm going to give it 3 stars as well. I maybe would have gone 4, but the stuff at the end, I couldn't ignore it.
I enjoyed a lot of this right from the start. While they're still in the ring, to get out, Undertaker kicks Mankind into the crowd barrier, and you could just hear his head crack off the metal. It sounded vicious, and it really was an omen of how this match was going to go, because they beat the shit out of each other more than they did in the Boiler Room Brawl. They utilized pretty much everything around the ring, from the steps to chairs to pens that Mankind used. I loved that the Undertaker turned around and started jamming that pen into Mankind's head. That was a good spot. And Bartlett, I agree, that chair shot, well, Joe, you brought it up too, that Undertaker took was fantastic. And then a little bit later, he comes back with a vicious looking chair shot across Mankind's back. And I loved that they immediately cut the camera to Paul Bear's face, and he gave us one of those great facial reactions like, no, such a fantastic man. And then we get the finish that I think we all saw coming but wanted to see. A choke slam into the grave. That's how it finished. And to me, the only downside of this entire match is after the match. We have the executioner guy come in. He hits Undertaker with a shovel. As I brought up before, the pay-per-view where Undertaker took on Diesel, that was where I remember as where I started watching. And I definitely remember this pay-per-view. I watched this when I was a kid. And if memory serves me correct, we are going to completely drop this executioner guy. Like, I don't even know if we acknowledge him in the next Raw. Like, he is just not going to be part of this story. The other thing that I noticed is an even bigger, probably a bigger hindrance to this match than the Executioner was how long it took everyone to cover the Undertaker. I mean, they were shoveling this dirt for, I don't know, 5 minutes or so. Yeah. And they learned their lesson, because in the future, when they have a buried alive match, there's a bulldozer.
Like a backhoe or something.
A front loader with a bucket full of dirt to dump immediately. So that's how they get around that awkward ending. But I thought the very last thing that we saw, the bolt of lightning on the tomb, the Undertaker's hand coming out, I mean, surely it's a little bit corny, but as a young kid, I ate that shit up. I loved it. And it's a great theatrical ending to this match. So because of the actual ring work between these two and the final ending to the match, I ended up going 1 notch higher than you two and went with a 4-star.
What did Meltzer think, Joe?
He gave it 3 3/4 stars. He said that although the ending was goofy, the match itself was a really good effort by both.
That's fair. Absolutely. So whenever I got to this point and was watching this finish, I could have swore I remember one of you two guys talking about somebody that we've seen in the past eventually being this executioner person. Was it maybe a former jobber of the week? Is this executioner?
I think I brought that up, but I don't think it was a jobber of the week.
Okay. I thought we had talked about him before.
Yeah, well, I could tell you that the man under the mask is Terry Gordy.
Yeah, that's the name, Terry Gordy. Yeah. Yep.
So I don't know if that was mentioned during your Jobber of the Week.
He wasn't a Jobber of the Week. I think I just remember hearing that name from like JR and stuff, bringing him up as a former guy that a lot of people respect. But when they brought him in, it was just clear that he couldn't go anymore. And that became clear very quick. And that's why it just gets dropped, because they're like, no, he can't wrestle anymore.
Yeah. You know what else I noticed during this match was Jerry Lawler. His commentary was a little different here. He wasn't doing, cracking the jokes and being the heel guy. He was kind of doing like his Attitude Era type commentary where he was doing like that high-pitched squeal that he does, and they're going to kill each other. They're going to kill each other, McMahon. They're going to kill each other.
Whenever
it was good.
Whenever they were doing the split screen with Sunny, he was like talking at her, and she looked at the camera and winked, and he got all giddy when he like he did. So I noticed that too.
Like this match, he wasn't rooting for Mankind in this match. He was just like, my God, these guys are going to kill each other. And it really brought back memories of Attitude Era commentary.
It is kind of interesting with the King and the Undertaker, though, because it does seem to be that is his take on the Undertaker. Is he doesn't usually root against him. Like he almost plays it off as he's afraid to root against the Undertaker. So he just is kind of indifferent to him,
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, there's no chance in hell that the King will ever have a Kiss My Foot match with the Undertaker. So best to just pretend like it'll never happen. Gentlemen, we have come to the end of our pay-per-view now, and so I have to ask you a question, probably the most important question of them all. At a price of $19.95, did you get your money's worth? Ryan, please, why don't you take that first?
This is a tricky one because we did have some stinkers in there, but at a discounted rate, I'm going to say I did only because of the first and last match. We've got Stone Cold, we got his music, we got definitive Stone Cold tonight. So that made me happy. And then this final match between Undertaker and Mankind, I thought these two guys put on a hell of a match. So at the discounted rate, I think I did.
I completely agree with Ryan. However, at some point, it sounds like they raised this $5.
Oh.
Yeah.
Weren't they $14.99 or something before?
Yeah, they were at the start. The past handful, we'll say the past 3 or 4 have been up to 20.
Yeah, I agree with Ryan. First and last match, I think, was enough to really get your money's worth there. I think that Undertaker and Mankind, this was a big build-up, and they delivered once again.
Yeah, I'm going to be disagreeing with you both here. A big fat no for me on that one. The whole thing with JR's microphone just ruined the entire first half of this pay-per-view for me. And then after that, there was nothing on the card besides the Buried Alive match that was entertaining. And as good as that Buried Alive match was, it wasn't enough to make up for the rest of it. So I'd have been pissed off. That JR stuff, let me tell you. The broken microphone. Like I was pretty goddamn torqued up about that.
When I first heard it, I said to myself, they're not going to do this for the whole show, right? Like it can't possibly happen. And it was only the first 2 matches, maybe, so thank goodness.
Yeah. Joe, what kind of numbers were you able to get out of the Wrestling Observer newsletter?
Well-received show from the Observer readers. 67% thumbs up for this show. And 18% thumbs down, the rest in the middle. The best match was voted as Undertaker versus Mankind. And the worst match was voted as Vader versus Sid, the Battle of the Powerbombs. Dave Meltzer described the event as an ordinary pay-per-view show, came off as more of a basic house show with a good gimmick match on top than a can't-miss memorable show.
That's fair.
He says the event drew over 9,000 fans and a gate of $135,000, the largest wrestling crowd and gate in Indianapolis since the 1992 WrestleMania. And just a couple other quick notes. Savio Vega suffered an undisclosed injury over the weekend on a Puerto Rico tour. And it is official that Bret Hart has signed his 20-year deal with WWF that Vince will surely honor. And that is all.
Thank you for that. And that is it, folks. We are done with this one. want to thank you again for joining us. If you like what we're doing here and want to connect with us, you can email us at WRASSLINRAW. Just add @gmail.com to the end of that to submit questions or comments. Check us out on social media and on every podcast subscription platform. While you're there, don't forget to follow and subscribe to get every episode of Wrasslin Raw coming to you every week. Give us a 5-star review. Let your friends know how much cooler they would be if they became Rawheads like you and me. Next week on Wrasslin Raw, we're going to take a look at the Raw that aired on October 21st, 1996, with matches featuring Owen Hart, Mark Mero, and many more. So, for Joe and Ryan, I'm Jason, and this has been Wrasslin Raw.